On a derelict orbital station circling a dead moon, Alara stood alone with her dragon, Kael. The station groaned softly in the vacuum, its metal bones creaking like an old tree in winter wind. Outside the thick observation glass, the stars burned, cold and distant, indifferent to the silence that had swallowed an entire world. Alara pressed her palm against the cool surface, her silver eyes fixed on the blue-green marble far below. Earth. Once bright with chatter, music, laughter, and even arguments that carried the weight of care. Now, nothing. Not a single transmission, not even static. Kael shifted behind her, his scales catching the dim emergency lights in ripples of bronze and shadow. He was smaller than the dragons of old myth, no bigger than a ground vehicle, but his presence filled the room like a storm waiting to break. His eyes, molten gold and slit with intelligence, watched her. He did not need words to understand her worry. He had known her since she was a child, since the day she stumbled into his cave on the ice plains of Virelia, half frozen and speaking a language no elf had ever heard. Humans had saved her then, fed her, taught her their songs. Now, they were gone. Alara turned from the window and walked to the comms console. Dust coated the controls, but the power still hummed faintly. She wiped the screen with her sleeve and tapped in a sequence of commands. The system whirred to life, scanning known frequencies. Channel after channel returned empty. No distress calls, no automated beacons, no pirate chatter. Just silence. A silence so complete it felt like a scream. She remembered the last message she had received from Earth. It was from a woman named Mara, a botanist working in the Pacific Arcology. Mara had sent a short audio log, her voice tired but warm. She spoke of a new strain of rice that could grow in salt water, of children laughing in the hydroponic gardens, of how she missed the smell of real rain. That was 17 days ago. Since then, nothing. Not even a ping from the orbital traffic network. Kael nudged her shoulder gently with his snout. His breath was warm, smelling of ozone and old stone. Alara reached up and scratched the ridge above his eye, a gesture that always calmed him. She needed to stay calm too, but the quiet gnawed at her. She had lived among humans for most of her life. They were messy, loud, often foolish, but they cared. They cared so much it sometimes hurt them. They gave food to strangers. They cried at stories. They built hospitals in war zones. Kindness was their flaw and their strength. And now it was gone. She accessed the deep archive logs from the Galactic Council. The Council had noticed the silence too. Their initial reports were cautious. Perhaps a solar flare had knocked out communications, perhaps a global network failure. But as days turned to weeks, their tone shifted. Speculation gave way to concern, then to fear. The Council had sent 2 scout vessels. Both returned with no data, no signs of life, and their crews strangely detached. One pilot had simply said, "They are still there. They just do not care anymore." Alara frowned. That made no sense. Even in the worst human conflicts, someone always cared. A medic tending the wounded, a parent shielding a child, a rebel broadcasting truth from a basement. Humanity's history was written in blood, yes, but also in compassion. To lose that entirely was like losing gravity. The world would fall apart. She pulled up a star map. The station she was on, designated OBS-7, had been abandoned after the Virelian War. It was a listening post, meant to monitor human broadcasts for signs of aggression. Instead, it had recorded their poetry, their lullabies, their late-night confessions aired on public channels by accident. Alara had come here hoping to find answers. Instead, she found only echoes. Kael suddenly tensed. His wings flared slightly and a low rumble vibrated in his chest. Alara froze. She knew that sound. It was not fear. It was warning. She turned slowly toward the corridor behind her. The lights flickered. A shadow moved at the edge of sight. Not a person. Not a machine. Something else. Something that did not belong. She reached for the pulse pistol at her hip. Her fingers steady despite the chill crawling up her spine. The station was supposed to be empty. She had scanned it twice before docking. No life signs, No power surges. Nothing. Yet something was here. Something that moved without sound, that left no thermal trace. Kale stepped in front of her, his body a living shield. His eyes glowed brighter, casting long shadows on the walls. The air grew heavy, thick with static. Ilara's hair lifted slightly, charged with unseen energy. Then, from the darkness, a whisper. Not in any language she knew, but in a tone that felt like ice sliding down her spine. It was not a voice, it was an absence. A hollow space where meaning should be. She did not understand the words, but she understood the intent. It was watching, waiting, testing. Ilara tightened her grip on the pistol. She did not fire. Shooting into the dark would only waste power and reveal her position. Instead, she backed toward the console, her eyes never leaving the corridor. Kale mirrored her movement, his tail coiled like a spring. The whisper came again, closer this time. It did not speak to her ears. It spoke to her mind. A single thought, cold and smooth as glass. Why help them? The question struck her like a physical blow. It was not accusatory. It was curious. As if kindness were a strange artifact, a relic from a forgotten age. She staggered, clutching her head. The thought echoed, repeating, growing louder. Why help them? They will not help you. They do not care. They never did. Kale roared. The sound shattered the spell. The whisper vanished, and the oppressive weight lifted. Ilara gasped, sinking to one knee. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Kale, who was now scanning the corridor with narrowed eyes, smoke curling from his nostrils. That was not natural, she thought. That was not human. And it was not alien in the way she knew aliens. It was something new, something wrong. She forced herself to stand. Her legs trembled, but she willed them to hold. She had to get off this station. She had to reach Earth. Whatever had silenced humanity was still active, and it was spreading. She activated the emergency beacon on her wristband. It would take hours for a rescue ship to arrive if one came at all. The Council had declared OB7 a quarantine zone after the scouts returned changed. No one was supposed to be here, but Ilara had never cared much for rules, especially when lives were at stake. As she gathered her gear, she glanced once more at the view screen. Earth hung in the black, beautiful and broken. She thought of Mara, of the children in the gardens, of the old man who used to play guitar on the street corner near her apartment in New Seattle. He always tipped his hat to her even when it rained. They were still there. She knew it. But something had stolen their hearts. And Ilara, the exiled elf with a dragon at her side, was the only one who remembered how to give them back. She turned off the console. The room fell into near darkness, lit only by the soft glow of Kale's eyes. Together they moved toward the docking bay, silent and swift. The station groaned again, as if mourning what had been lost. But Ilara did not mourn. Not yet. Mourning came after the fight, and the fight had just begun. In the distance the whisper stirred once more, not in the corridor this time, but inside her own mind. Softer now, almost gentle. You cannot save them. Ilara smiled. It was a small, hard smile, forged in the fires of loss and loyalty. Watch me. The High Council convened in the obsidian spire of Zanara Prime, a needle of black stone that pierced the clouds of the capital world. Its chambers were carved from memory stone, a material that absorbed the echoes of every decision made within. Over centuries, the walls had grown heavy with verdicts, treaties, and condemnations. Today, they would bear witness to something new, something uncertain. Ilara stood outside the grand chamber, her boots scuffed from the long walk through the lower halls. Kale waited beside her, coiled low to avoid the low archways. His presence drew stares from the robed attendants and armored envoys who passed by. Dragons were rare in council space. Most had vanished centuries ago, deemed too wild for civilized governance. But Kale was not wild. He was watchful, and he knew when his human was in danger. Inside the chamber, voices rose and fell like tides. Ilara did not need to hear the words to know what they were saying. She had intercepted their communiques during her flight from OBS-7. Earth was now labeled a Class 0 anomaly. No transmissions. No aggression. No response to hails. The official stance was caution. The unofficial one was fear. She adjusted the thin cloak over her shoulders. It was woven from human fabric, dyed the color of storm clouds. Beneath it she wore a simple tunic and trousers, both patched from years of travel. She carried no weapons openly, though Kale's shadow was weapon enough. Her only hope was to be heard before they sealed Earth away forever. A chime sounded. The great doors slid open, revealing a circular room lit by floating orbs of soft white light. At the center sat the council dais, 7 seats for 7 species. The Varelians, tall and pale, their skin threaded with faint blue veins. The Grith, insectoid and silent, their multifaceted eyes reflecting every angle of the room. The Solari, golden-skinned and serene, their voices like wind through crystal. And others, each representing a civilization that had survived its own darkness. Alara stepped forward. Kale followed, his claws clicking softly on the polished floor. Gasps rippled through the gallery. No one had brought a dragon into the spire in 300 years. Counselor Vela of the Varelians rose first. Her voice was sharp, edged with disapproval. You were not summoned, exile. Your presence here is a breach of protocol. Alara met her gaze without flinching. I did not come for permission. I came to speak for those who cannot. The Solari Elder, a being named Orcs, tilted his head. We have reviewed the data from your unauthorized entry into OB7. You claim Earth's silence is not natural. Explain. Alara walked to the center of the chamber. She did not bow. She did not plead. She simply spoke. Humanity did not fall to war. They did not burn their world. They stopped caring. Something changed them. Not their bodies. Their minds. Their hearts. I heard it, on the station. A whisper that made kindness feel foolish. That made help seem pointless. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Grith envoy shifted, their antennae twitching. One of the younger Varelian aides scoffed. Humans were always emotional. Perhaps they finally evolved beyond sentiment. Alara turned to him. Is that what you call it when a mother stops holding her child? When a doctor walks away from a dying patient? When no one answers a cry for help, evolution, or emptiness? Silence fell. Even the memory stone seemed to hold its breath. Orcs spoke again, his tone softer. We sent 2 scout ships. Both returned with crews intact, but altered. They performed their duties, but they showed no concern for each other. No joy, no grief. We quarantined them, studied them, found no pathogen, no neural tampering we could detect. Then you were not looking in the right place, Alara said. It is not in the blood. It is in the choice. It makes you choose not to care. The council exchanged glances. Such a concept was alien to them. Their societies were built on logic, duty, or hive mind unity. Empathy was a human quirk, admired from afar but never fully understood. To lose it so completely was not just strange. It was terrifying. Counselor Vela crossed her arms. Even if your theory is correct, what would you have us do? Send more ships. Risk more minds. Earth is no longer a threat, but it is no longer an ally either. Let it sleep. Alara's hands clenched. Sleeping implies waking. This is not sleep. This is erasure. And if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. Kale let out a low growl. Not loud, but deep enough to vibrate the floor. The attendants near the doors flinched. Orcs raised a hand for calm. There is one vessel still near Earth, Alara continued. The Dawn Warden. A medical and research ship. It went dark the same day as the rest, but its last known position was stable orbit near Mars. If anyone left a record, it would be there. The Dawn Warden is sealed under Quarantine Order Alpha 9, Vela said. No access without full council consensus. Then give me consensus, Alara said. Impossible. You are not a citizen of any council world. You are an exile. A half-breed raised by primitives. Alara's eyes flashed silver, a trait of her sylvan blood when angered. I am the only one who knows what kindness sounds like, and right now that is the only weapon you have. The chamber fell still. Even the air seemed to pause. Orcs leaned forward. Why do you care so much? They are not your people. They became my people, Alara said quietly, when my own cast me out for being too soft, too curious, too willing to listen. Humans took me in. They taught me that weakness can be strength, that sharing pain makes it lighter. I owe them more than silence. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Oris turned to the others. Let her go. If she returns with proof, we act. If she does not, the quarantine stands. Phala protested, but the Solari elder's word carried weight. The vote was called. 4 in favor. 3 opposed. It was enough. Alara bowed then, not out of submission but respect. She turned to leave, Kale at her side. Wait, Oris said. If this whisper you speak of is real, it may already be here, in this room, in our thoughts. How will you fight it? Alara paused at the door. By remembering, she said. By choosing to care even when it hurts, even when no one else does. Outside, the sky of Zanara Prime burned violet with twilight. Alara walked quickly through the gardens of the spire, her mind racing. She had permission but not support. No ship, no crew, no supplies. Just a name and a hope. But she had Kale, and she had stolen something else before leaving OBS-7. In the lower docks, hidden behind a maintenance bay, sat a small courier vessel. It was old, its hull patched with mismatched plating, but its engines were sound. She had taken it from a sleeping logistics officer whose data pad still glowed with open clearance codes. The name on the side read Emberfly. It was human-made. A relic from the early expansion era. She had chosen it for that reason. Kale leapt into the cargo hold with practiced ease. Alara climbed into the cockpit and powered up the systems. The ship hummed to life, its interface flickering with outdated symbols. She entered the coordinates for Mars orbit. The journey would take 3 days at full burn. As the Emberfly lifted from the dock, Alara looked back at the obsidian spire. She wondered if she would ever return. She wondered if anyone would remember her name if she did not. But names did not matter. Actions did. She engaged the thrusters. The stars stretched into lines as the ship pierced the atmosphere. Below, Zanara Prime faded into the distance. Ahead, the void waited, and somewhere in that void a ship floated, holding the last truth of a silent world. Alara set the autopilot and leaned back. Exhaustion tugged at her bones, but she could not sleep. Not yet. She pulled a small device from her pocket. A data chip she had pried from the OBS-7 comms core. It contained fragments of the last human broadcasts. She plugged it into the ship's console. Static. Then a voice. Young, female. Singing, it was off-key. Hesitant, but full of warmth. Alara closed her eyes and listened. The song was about dandelions growing through cracks in the sidewalk, about hope in small places. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness. From defiance, they were still there, buried but not gone. And she would find them. Even if the whole galaxy had forgotten what it meant to care, she would remember for them. The Emberfly raced toward the red planet, its engines burning bright against the endless dark. Inside, an elf woman and her dragon flew toward the edge of silence, carrying the only thing that could break it. A memory of kindness. The Emberfly drifted into orbit around Mars, its engines cooling in the thin red haze of the planet's upper atmosphere. Below, the rust-colored plains stretched endlessly, scarred by ancient rivers and human ambition. But Alara's eyes were not on Mars. They were on the ship hanging in the void just beyond the planet's shadow. The Dawn Warden, once a symbol of human hope, now a ghost wrapped in silence. Kale stirred in the cargo hold, his scales glinting in the dim cockpit light. He sensed it too. The wrongness. Not danger in the usual sense. No weapons charged. No alarms blaring. Just a stillness so deep it felt like the ship had stopped breathing. Alara ran a final diagnostic. Life support offline. Power at 15%. Comms dead. Hull integrity stable. No signs of battle damage. No debris field. Nothing to explain why a fully staffed medical vessel had gone dark without a trace. She took a slow breath and activated the docking sequence. Magnetic clamps engaged with a soft thud. Air pressure equalized. The hatch hissed open. She stepped into the Dawn Warden wearing a sealed environment suit, its visor reflecting the emergency lights that pulsed faintly along the corridor. Kale followed. His body low to the floor, his nostrils flaring as he sampled the air. Even through filters, the scent was wrong. Not decay, not fire. Something sterile. Empty. The first thing she noticed was the order. Everything was in place. Trays of surgical tools laid out neatly. Data pads stacked on consoles. Boots lined up by a crew bunkroom door. But no people, no bodies. No signs of panic. It was as if everyone had simply walked away mid-task. In the mess hall, a meal sat on a table. A bowl of soup long dried into a crust. a spoon beside it, a child's drawing taped to the wall above, a son with a smiling face labeled for Dr. Lena. Alara's chest tightened. She knew Lena. A physician from the Atlantic Coalition, sharp kind, always humming while she worked. Where was she now? Cale nudged a chair with his snout. It scraped against the floor, the sound unnaturally loud. Alara moved deeper into the ship, her boots echoing in the hollow halls. Every room told the same story. Life interrupted, not ended. Paused. Then she found the medbay. The door slid open with a whisper. Inside, rows of biobeds stood empty, their restraints unbuckled. Monitors displayed flat lines, their screens dark. But in the far corner, a single terminal glowed. Alara approached slowly. The screen showed a log entry, time-stamped the day Earth went silent. It was written by someone named Claire, another name she recognized, a xenolinguist who had helped translate Sylvan texts for human archives. Her words were hurried, the script jagged. It does not kill, it hollows. We thought it was a virus at first, then a neural weapon, but it is neither. It targets mirror neurons, the part of the brain that lets us feel what others feel. Once infected, you do not hate. You do not rage. You just stop caring. A patient screams in pain. You note the vitals. You do not comfort them. A friend cries. You walk away. Not out of cruelty, out of indifference. It spreads through proximity, through shared air, through silence. We tried isolation. It did not work. It is already in us. I can feel it. I am writing this because I remember what it was like to care. But soon I will not. Send help or do not. It does not matter. The entry ended there. Alara stared at the screen. Her hands trembled. Mirror neurons. The biological root of empathy. If those were disabled, kindness became impossible, not suppressed. Impossible. Like trying to see color in total darkness. Cale growled. Low. Urgent. He was staring at the ventilation grate above the terminal. Alara followed his gaze. A fine dust coated the edges. Not rust, not mold. Something crystalline, almost invisible. She pulled a sample kit from her belt and scraped a few particles into a vial. The analyzer beeped softly. Unknown organic compound. Self-replicating. Airborne. Neuroactive. The parasite. It was not alive in the traditional sense. More like a machine made of thought. Designed not to destroy but to erase connection, to make every being an island, and it was still active. She looked around the medbay. The vents ran through the entire ship. If the parasite was here, it was everywhere, including the air she had just breathed. A cold numbness crept up her spine. Not fear, something worse, detachment. She blinked hard, shook her head. No, she would not let it take her. Not yet. She sealed the sample vial and tucked it into her suit. Then she moved to the main data core, hoping for more logs, more clues. But the system was corrupted, files fragmented. Only one folder remained intact. Labeled Final Broadcast, she opened it. A video played. Claire again, her face pale, her eyes hollow. Behind her, crew members moved like sleepwalkers, performing tasks with mechanical precision. No greetings. No eye contact. No wasted motion. If anyone sees this, Claire said, her voice flat, do not come. It is too late for us. But maybe not for others. The parasite does not respond to violence. It feeds on apathy. The less you care, the stronger it grows. The only way to fight it is to care more. Loudly, stubbornly, illogically. Tell stories. Hold hands. Sing off-key. Do the things that make no sense except to the heart. That is the antidote. Not medicine. Not weapons. Kindness. Repeated. Even when it feels pointless. The video ended. Alara stood in the silent medbay, the weight of Claire's words pressing down on her. It was not a war to be won with guns or shields. It was a war of attention, of choice. And humanity had lost it not because they were weak, but because they were tired. And in their exhaustion, they had stopped choosing each other. Cale pressed against her leg, his warmth a grounding force. She leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. He had never been infected. Dragons did not think like humans. Their bonds were deeper than neurons, older than language. He was safe. For now. But she was not. A whisper brushed her mind. Soft. Insistent. Why help them? They will not thank you. They do not even know you are coming. She gritted her teeth. I do not need thanks. I need them to remember. The whisper did not argue. It simply faded, leaving behind a chilling emptiness. That was its power. It did not fight, it waited. It let you convince yourself that caring was foolish. Alara activated her suit's internal recorder. She spoke clearly, forcing warmth into her voice despite the cold creeping into her thoughts. "This is Alara of Virelia. Aboard the Dawn Warden, the silence on Earth is not natural. It is caused by a neural parasite that disables empathy. It spreads through inaction, through silence. The cure is not science, it is connection. I will send this data to the Council, and I will send a signal of my own, one they cannot ignore." She returned to the cockpit of the Emberfly, Kale close behind. She linked the ship's transmitter to the Dawn Warden's array, boosting the signal. Then she opened a new channel. Not to the Council. To Earth, she did not speak in codes or protocols. She spoke like a human would, simple, direct, full of feeling. This is for Mara, for Lena, for Claire, for the boy who shared his water, for the old man with the guitar, for everyone who ever gave something they did not have to give. You are still there. And you can still care. Start small. Say a name. Hold a hand. Hum a song. It matters. It always mattered. She repeated the message in every human language she knew. English, Spanish, Mandarin, Swahili, Arabic, French, Russian, Hindi. Each time her voice grew stronger. Each time she pushed back against the numbness. When she finished, she sent the parasite sample data to the Council with a single line. This is not a disease. It is a test, and humanity is failing. Kale rested his head on the console, his eyes half closed. Alara placed a hand on his snout. She could feel the fatigue in her bones. The parasite was working. Slowly, surely, making her wonder if any of this was worth it. But then she remembered the dandelion drawing, the dried soup, the off-key song on the data chip. Small things, fragile things, human things. And she knew. As long as one person remembered how to care, the silence could be broken, even if it started with just a whisper. The signal left the Emberfly like a ripple in still water. It traveled faster than light, carried on a burst of modulated gravitons piercing through the silence that had wrapped Earth for weeks. It was not a command, not a warning, just a voice, simple, human, stubborn. Alara did not know if anyone would hear it. She only knew she had to send it. On Zanara Prime, the Council watched from the Obsidian Spire, their screens lit with the raw feed from the Dawn Warden array. They saw Ilara's face, pale but resolute, her silver eyes holding a fire that logic could not explain. They heard her repeat the same words in language after language, each time softer, as if speaking to a child who had forgotten their own name. They did not understand, not fully, but they felt it. Even the Grith, whose species had no concept of individual emotion, shifted uneasily in their carapaces. Something in that signal tugged at the edges of their awareness. Something old. Something necessary. On Earth, the signal reached through dead satellites, through abandoned relay towers, through the cracked screens of phones left on silent in empty rooms. It played in subway tunnels and ruined hospitals, in the quiet corners of arcologies where people moved like shadows. In New Seattle, a woman named Mara stood at the edge of a hydroponic garden, her hands resting on the railing. The plants were dying. No one had watered them in days. She had not cared. Not really. The thought of tending them felt pointless. But then, from a speaker buried in the wall, a voice spoke. "You can still care." She froze. The words meant nothing, and yet they pulled at something deep inside her chest. A memory. Of green shoots pushing through nutrient gel. Of children laughing as they planted seeds. Of hope, fragile but real. Her fingers twitched. Then slowly she turned and walked back to the control panel. She pressed the button to restart the irrigation cycle. The pipes groaned, then hissed to life. Water trickled into the roots.
She did not smile.
But she stayed. Watching. In Cairo Arcology 7, a soldier named Dante stood guard at a sealed gate. His rifle hung loose in his hands. Orders had stopped coming days ago. No one told him what to do. No one cared if he stayed or left. He had almost walked away. But then the voice came through his earpiece, crackling with static. "Say a name," he frowned. Then, without thinking, he spoke into the comm. Riley, his partner, who had not moved from his post in 3 days, who had not eaten, who had not responded to calls. "Riley," Dante said again, louder this time. "You still there?" A pause. Then a weak cough. "Yeah, still here." Dante walked over and pressed a ration bar into Riley's hand. Riley looked at it, then at Dante. For the first time in weeks, his eyes held something besides emptiness. Gratitude. In the Pacific ruins, a boy named Leo sat alone on a broken pier, staring at the ocean. His parents were gone. He did not know where. He had stopped looking. But then from a floating buoy nearby, the voice played. Hum a song. He did not know why, but he started to hum. A tune his mother used to sing, off-key, shaky, but real. A woman walking past paused. She sat beside him, and hummed too. Across the planet, small acts flickered to life. A blanket shared in a cold shelter. A name spoken to a stranger. A hand held in the dark. None of it was grand. None of it was planned. But it was enough. The parasite recoiled. It had thrived on silence, on isolation, on the slow erosion of connection. But this stubborn, illogical, inefficient kindness was something it could not consume. Because kindness, when chosen freely, created ripples, and ripples became waves. On the Emberfly, Alara watched the data stream from Earth. At first, nothing. Then faint signals, a power grid reactivating in Tokyo sector, a medical drone launching from Geneva, a child's voice singing into a broken radio in Buenos Aires. Her breath caught. It was working. Cale lifted his head, his golden eyes bright. He felt it too. The shift. The return of something vital. But the parasite was not gone. It was fighting back. In the cockpit, the lights flickered. The air grew cold. The whisper returned stronger this time, not just in her mind, but in the ship's speakers, in the hum of the engines, in the silence between heartbeats. You are too late. They will forget again. They always do. Alara gripped the edge of the console. Her vision blurred. The numbness spread through her limbs, heavy and slow. She wanted to lie down, to stop trying. What did it matter if one world remembered kindness? The galaxy was vast, cold, indifferent. Cale roared. The sound shattered the spell. Fire bloomed in his throat, not aimed at anything, just released. A raw burst of life against the void. The ship's system stabilized. The whisper faded. Alara gasped, tears streaming down her face. Not from fear, from relief. She was still herself, still fighting. She opened a new channel, this time, not just to Earth, but to every council world, every listening post, every ship in orbit. She sent the parasite data, Claire's logs, her own observations, and one final message. Kindness is not weakness. It is resistance, and it is contagious. On Zanera Prime, Counselor Vela stared at the screen. She had argued for quarantine, for distance, for safety. But now, watching humans reach for each other in the ruins, she felt something unfamiliar. Not logic, not duty. Something warmer. She turned to Oris. We were wrong. Oris nodded. Perhaps kindness is not a flaw. Perhaps it is the only thing that survives the end of everything else. Back on Earth, Mara knelt in the garden, her hands in the soil. A new shoot had broken through the surface, green, alive. She touched it gently. Then she looked up at the sky as if she could see the ship orbiting far above. Thank you, she whispered. Alara did not hear her, but she felt it, a warmth in her chest, a light pushing back the dark. The parasite was still there, hiding in the cracks, waiting. But it was no longer winning, because humanity had remembered how to begin again. And sometimes, that was enough. Cale curled around her in the cockpit, his body a shield and a promise. Alara rested her head against his scales and closed her eyes. She was tired, but she was not done. Not yet. Below, the world breathed. Softly, unevenly. But it breathed. And in that breath, hope lived. Months passed. The silence that had wrapped Earth like a shroud began to fray at the edges, then tear open in places where people chose to speak, to touch, to stay. The parasite did not vanish. It could not be killed like a virus or purged like a toxin. It lived in the spaces between choices, waiting for exhaustion, for despair. For the moment, someone decided caring was too hard, but humans, stubborn and flawed as ever, kept choosing anyway. Alara and Cale landed in what was once Central Park, now a patchwork of wild grass crumbling paths, and young trees pushing through broken concrete. The city around them was quiet but not dead. Smoke rose from chimneys in the distance. Voices carried on the wind, real voices, not echoes. A child laughed somewhere near the old fountain, now half filled with rainwater and floating petals. They had not come as saviors. They had come as reminders. Alara wore simple clothes again. Sturdy boots, a patched jacket, her hair tied back. No armor, no insignia. Just an elf woman and her dragon walking into a world that was learning to feel again. People saw them and did not run. Some bowed. Others simply nodded. They knew who she was. Not by name, but by what she had done. She had sent a voice into the dark when no one else would. In the weeks after the signal, small communities had formed. Not governments. Not armies. Just groups of people who decided to look after each other. They shared food. They told stories at night. They buried the lost with names spoken aloud. It was messy. It was slow. But it was real. Alara found Mara tending a garden near the eastern ridge of the park. Rows of vegetables grew in repurposed shipping containers. Mara looked older. Her face lined with fatigue, but her eyes were clear. She smiled when she saw Alara, not with grand gratitude, but with quiet recognition. "You came back?" Mara said. "I never left," Alara replied. "Not really." Kale lay down in the sun, his scales warming like old bronze. Children gathered at a distance, curious but not afraid. One brave girl stepped forward and held out a piece of bread. Kale sniffed it, then gently took it from her hand. The girl beamed. Mara watched them. "We thought we were broken," she said, "that something inside us had snapped for good." "You were not broken," Alara said. "Just tired." "Kindness is hard when you are tired." Mara nodded. "So we rest. Then we try again." That was the lesson Earth had learned. Kindness was not a constant flame. It was a spark that had to be relit every day, sometimes hourly, and that was okay. The council had changed too. They sent no envoys, no inspectors. Instead, they opened their archives, shared medical knowledge, offered clean water purifiers and seed banks. Not as charity, as apology. They had watched humanity fall into silence and assumed the worst. Now they saw the truth. Compassion was not weakness. It was resilience. Alara was offered a seat on the council, a place among the great minds of the galaxy. She declined. Her place was here, not in spires of memory stone, but in gardens grown from rubble, not in debates about protocol, but in the quiet act of showing up. She stayed in the park, in a small shelter built from salvaged wood and solar panels. Kale slept beside her, his breath a steady rhythm in the night. During the day, she walked the city. She taught children how to identify edible plants. She helped rebuild a clinic. She sat with the grieving and said nothing, just stayed. That was enough. The parasite still stirred sometimes. On long nights when the wind howled through empty buildings, people felt it. The urge to close the door, to look away, to stop trying. But now they knew how to fight it. They lit candles. They sang songs. They held hands. They remembered, one evening as the sun set in streaks of orange and purple, a group gathered around a fire in the center of the park. Stories were told. Not of heroes or battles, but of small moments. A shared cup of tea. A repaired toy. A letter found in a drawer written years ago and never sent. Each story was a thread, weaving a net strong enough to hold them all. Alara sat at the edge of the circle, Kale's head resting in her lap. She did not speak. She listened. And in that listening, she gave them the greatest gift, her attention. Years later, when the council asked why humanity had survived when other species had fallen to similar threats, they sent a delegation to Earth. They expected monuments, declarations, grand theories. Instead, they found Alara in the same park, now green and full of life, teaching a group of children how to plant seeds. They asked her the question, why did they survive? Alara looked at the children, their hands dirty, their faces bright with concentration. She thought of Mara, of Dante and Riley, of the boy who hummed on the pier, of Claire who wrote her warning even as she forgot how to care. They forgot how to care, Alara said softly, but they never forgot how to begin again. And sometimes that was enough. The council envoys stood in silence. They had come for an answer. They left with a question. What if kindness was not the exception? What if it was the rule? Back on Zanara Prime, the memory stone walls of the obsidian spire began to change. New echoes settled into their depths, not of verdicts or treaties, but of lullabies, of shared meals, of hands reaching across the dark. On Earth, the work continued. Not perfect, not easy, but chosen. Every day. Alara walked home as dusk fell, Kale at her side. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass. Somewhere a guitar played. Off-key. Warm. Human. She smiled. Not because the world was healed, but because it was trying, and in that trying there was hope.